my name is James Nicholson and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I want to talk about something that isn't really getting discussed much. You see, the Renters' Rights Bill is all about improving renters' rights. But there's a good point made by a company called Good Lord. They are a company that have financial software that is used by letting agents. In fact, a couple of the letting agents I use are actually Good Lord customers. And they're saying that this bill could be an absolute disaster for a lot of tenants, because if they were to get evicted, they would end up with a CCJ, which is something that they might not get in today's market. So in this video, I'm going to talk about why this is different, what changes we've got, what impact it could have on tenants, and why not everything in the Renters' Rights Bill is necessarily good for tenants. Now, if you're new around here and you haven't done already, do make sure you subscribe to the channel over there and hit that bell notification. By subscribing to the channel, you will get all the latest property news, interest rate news, house price news, Renters' Rights Bill news, and property investing news, plus much, much more. And let's get some views on this video. How do we do that? Well, your part is simple. All you need to do is smash like, tickle like, do something to that like button. That helps with the YouTube algorithm, and that's really helped the channel grow. So thanks to everybody that's done that. So what's going on? Well, Good Lord are a company that, as I said, they provide letting management software. And so these guys are highly involved in the vetting process of tenants. So let's just say a letting agent, they put out their listing on Rightmove, then they get inundated with applicants, and the agent would then work through the applicants and get some viewings booked. At that stage, Good Lord comes into effect, and they will use Good Lord to look at things like the references of the tenant, to check if they've got CCJs and that kind of stuff. And what's been missed in the Renters' Rights Bill by a lot of people is the fact that if you get rid of Section 21, so right now, the process is, if you have a tenant that doesn't pay you rent, damages your property, or causes a nuisance, you've got two ways to evict them. One is through a Section 21. That's a no-fault eviction. It's a fairly fast process. And if the tenant just leaves at the end of that, then they don't get any court logs on their record, so they don't get a CCJ. And the landlord might not necessarily get back any rent in arrears or that such. And so landlords do prefer that because they want to get the property back and rent it out to someone that does pay them rent. That's very important, obviously, to get rent in so you can pay your mortgage. The other route to get someone evicted is via a Section 8. Now, that does go through court. It's a slow process because the problem that you've got is the courts have such a backlog at the moment. But if the tenant does go through that process, the Section 8 process, and it's judged that they're in arrears and they need to pay that back, they would get a CCJ. So you're taking away the Section 21 method, which the landlords prefer, and also ultimately can be better for some tenants. And then you're just going to have a process that ends up with these people getting a CCJ. Now, tenants that don't pay you, they often don't realise how lucky they are that 9 times out of 10, they don't get a CCJ. Because then they can go and get another tenancy quite easily. They can get car loans, they can get mortgages, because they don't have that CCJ. There's not a stamp or a record on their file saying that they didn't pay rent. So what this is going to do is increase the amount of tenants that get CCJs. They won't necessarily realise until they really go through this process of not paying rent, getting a CCJ, that then they're going to find it very, very hard to get a new tenancy. Now, their options would be limited in that instance, and they would probably have to look for social housing or council housing. The problem is, council housing and social housing have huge waiting lists, and you need to be a very vulnerable person in order to jump right up that list. If you were a guy that lived on your own, you're unlikely to probably get anything on that. Whereas if you're a single parent, a mother with a child, you're more likely to jump higher up that list. But still, this is something that is going to cause major problems for a lot of people that put their head in the sand and don't deal with issues. So while Section 21 does have its faults, it's a no-fault eviction, but it isn't perfect, is what I mean. And so while it's not perfect, the problem with the Section 21 is that a small minority of landlords used it in an unfair way. And councils are getting frustrated with Section 21s being served on tenants. And in fact, if you're a tenant and you get a Section 21, the advice that you get from the council is to ignore it and don't leave the property until you actually get bailiffs turning up at the property. Now, I can't imagine living in that way. If I was a tenant and I knew that I was going to get evicted, the stress of waiting for that bailiff is not going to be good. But the problem is the council isn't going to rehome you until you actually physically get evicted, and then you'd be put into emergency accommodation, possibly. But you also possibly could end up with no accommodation. And that's what they're saying here. And so Good Lord have got a very good point here. CCJs are going to become a lot more common for tenants. Now, landlords that watch my channel have often said, why can't we have a database of bad tenants? And that is a valid question. I'll tell you why you can't, because of things like GDPR. You're not allowed to necessarily know that data. And that's one reason why I don't think you would ever get that data. But if you use a letting agent that vets your tenants, then eventually you are effectively going to get this database that you so want, because more people will have CCJs, and so you'll have a better understanding on who are the late payers, who are the bad tenants. And that's the point that Good Lord is saying, is that you're going to get a lot of people that potentially could have snuck through because they didn't pay the rent, but the other landlord just wanted them out, and then they got a new tenancy and maybe they sorted themselves out after that. You're going to get an extra huge amount of tenants that get these CCJs, and then they can't get a private rental property. So that's good effectively for landlords, but bad for those tenants. This bill is meant to be supporting tenants, and ultimately the outcome is going to be CCJs on tenants if they don't pay, and you're going to shrink the private rental market, which we've talked about quite a few times on here, and that ultimately is going to push rents up. So the outcome of this is some tenants are going to get CCJs and find it really hard, and everybody else is going to find less rental property available, thus a more expensive rental market, which is exactly what the government is trying not to achieve. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. If you haven't grabbed a copy of our new ebook, Mortgage Secrets, how to get the best mortgage deal in 2025. Hundreds of you have now done that. I'm going to link it in the description and in the comments below. Do grab a copy of that. It's totally free. It might help you save thousands of pounds on your next mortgage, whether you're remortgaging soon or in the future. Go and grab that and check that out. Make sure you check out all the other content as well on the channel, including this video right here.